Unsurprisingly, there's a lot of correlation between some of the most well-regarded and best-reviewed games of all time and the biggest sales numbers. However, that's not always the case. Not every game on this list is bad, but they all do have one thing in common: their sales numbers are much higher than you'd expect. I'm Sai for WhatCulture.com, and these are 10 video games you didn't realise were very successful. Number 10. Enter the Matrix. The Matrix Reloaded had its moments, but it failed to recapture the magic of the original film. Despite it being a movie that didn't have the warmest reception, there are plenty who love it, which coincidentally is the same thing that can be said for its tie-in video game. Enter the Matrix released 2 review scores which sat firmly in the average at best camp. Due to its imprecise controls and shoddy camera, some believe that Enter the Matrix failed to emulate the bullet time or the badass fight choreography, the 2 most iconic elements of the Wachowskis' creation. However, no one could fault Enter the Matrix's marketing. Hype for the Matrix Reloaded was through the roof, so it was no surprise its video game counterpart was advertised just as much. Because the game gave further insight on certain subplots in the Matrix Reloaded, gamers had further incentive to check it out. Within a month, Enter the Matrix sold 2.5 million units, making it the fastest selling game in Atari's history. Selling 5 million in total, Enter the Matrix did pretty well for itself. Some fans regard it as a hidden gem, but with numbers like that, maybe it's not so hidden after all. Number 9. Mortal Kombat vs DC Universe. Fans were elated when Mortal Kombat vs DC Universe was announced. Having Scorpion fight Batman or Liu Kang squaring off against the Joker sounded like a dream come true. Only if you had really weird and specific dreams though, maybe. But because a lot of DC comics are geared towards kids, the crossover had to drastically tone down the violence with which Mortal Kombat is known for. Naturally, gamers were up in arms. Bloodshed is the bread and butter of the franchise, and Mortal Kombat without gore is like Mario without jumping or an EA title without disappointment. Considering Mortal Kombat vs DC Universe was the last game Midway released before filing for bankruptcy, many assumed this stinker bombed spectacularly. However, the crossover sold over 2 million units and was the most pre-ordered MK game ever at the time. According to GameStop, this fighting title made up 55% of the company's sales during the first week of its release. Midway didn't go bankrupt because of Mortal Kombat vs DC Universe, but in spite of it, it went bust literally the same week this crossover was released, so it had no bearing on the company staying afloat. Number 8. Shadow the Hedgehog. After Sonic's anti-hero Shadow became hugely popular, the rebellious Hedgehog got his own spin-off. In 2005, Shadow the Hedgehog hit shelves, and by God, it was terrible. The dark themes and gun violence feel totally out of place in Sonic, and even if you were on board with the edgy style and Shadow's too cool for school attitude, every other aspect of the game is woeful. The level design is barren, and you'll careen to your death more times than you can count thanks to unpredictable controls. You'd assume Shadow the Hedgehog would fail for 2 reasons. Firstly, it's very bad. Secondly, it was the first Sonic-based title to receive an E10+ rating, limiting its potential audience. And yet, Shadow the Hedgehog sold over 2 million units, outperforming even Sonic Adventure 2, which some fans consider the last great Sonic title. Whilst its audience may have been slightly limited by an age rating, it was also much broader because the game released on Xbox, GameCube and PlayStation 2. Thus, within all the titles that Sonic has been in over the last 2 decades, Shadow the Hedgehog is among the most successful entries. Number 7. Star Wars Battlefront 2. Although some video game controversies usually make a mountain out of a molehill, the concerns surrounding Star Wars Battlefront 2 couldn't be overstated. When government officials got involved to determine whether the loot boxes in the game constitute as unlicensed gambling, then the creators must have known they'd screwed up big time. The scandal got so out of hand, EA's share price plummeted, resulting in the loss of $3 billion in stock value. Because Battlefront 2 didn't make as much as its predecessor and missed its sales target, the infamous Star Wars follow-up has been branded as a failure. But one should never underestimate the power of branding. Any product, no matter how bad it is sure to attract a massive audience if it's based on George Lucas's sci-fi epic. Star Wars Battlefront 2 has met with strife since day one, but it still managed to sell 9 million copies. Because of the stock drop, the game didn't make a profit, but that doesn't change the fact that Battlefront 2 sold extremely well. Number 6. Dr. Mario. The Tetris craze was in full swing during the early 90s, inspiring gaming studios to forge their own clones of it, hoping to generate a ton of cash. Of course, the most well-known Tetris doppelganger might be Dr. Mario. Throughout this puzzle game, the Italian plumber tosses vitamin capsules into a bottle to align the same colours in order to destroy the nasty viruses. Although Dr. Mario is addictive and has incredibly catchy tunes, it's surprising to see Nintendo plagiarise another property so flagrantly. Because Dr. Mario was blatantly created to piggyback off the success of Tetris, you'd assume gamers would see through it, KINECT and stick to the original. But that wasn't the case. Dr. Mario was a blinding success, selling 10 million units. In fact, it outdid some mainstream Mario titles by a considerable amount. It sold double the amount of Super Mario Sunshine and Super Mario World 2 Yoshi's Island, and even though Super Mario Galaxy is hailed as a modern masterpiece, Dr. Mario has it beat by 3 million copies. Number 5. Resident Evil 5. Even though Resident Evil 5 was decent, it didn't come close to matching the standards of the previous installment. Resi 6 may be the nadir of the zombie saga, but we can see the same issues nesting in the entry that came before. Cheesy dialogue, focusing on bombastic action rather than survival horror, and of course, boulder punching. Fortunately, things course corrected with Resident Evil 7, and the Undead series has been on the straight and narrow ever since. And the recent spate of remakes and Resident Evil Village have certainly made a dent sales-wise, but they're all beat by Resident Evil 5. Because of its various re-releases over different console generations, the game has sold 13.4 million units to date. It was also the most successful Capcom release for nearly 9 years until it was surpassed by Monster Hunter World. With Resident Evil 4 Remake still raking in the numbers very quickly, it's only a matter of time before it catches up. Nevertheless, it's still a remarkable and perplexing achievement how Resident Evil 5 has maintained this record for well over a decade, despite being perceived as a disappointment. Number 4. NINTENDOGS. Because of its simple gameplay and adorable characters, NINTENDOGS is one of the most delightful gaming experiences any animal lover can imagine. Despite receiving positive reviews, you wouldn't expect a pet simulator to fly off the shelves. Not only does it sound like a niche market, NINTENDOGS doesn't have the same level of recognition as Mario or The Legend of Zelda, does it? Although Nintendo were probably expecting a reasonable profit, nobody thought this Tamagotchi-inspired title would blow up. NINTENDOGS was the most successful game on the DS at the time, apart from New Super Mario Bros., meaning it even outsold Mario Kart DS. And there were plenty of consumers that bought a DS just to play with digital pets, since the sales for the handheld system quadrupled the same week NINTENDOGS was released. NINTENDOGS sold almost 24 million units, making it among the most successful games of all time. It outperformed gigantic titles including Red Dead Redemption, Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire, and 2018's God of War. The fact that this title sold almost as much as Super Mario Bros. 3 and Sonic the Hedgehog is simply bewildering. Number 3. PAC-MAN, Atari version. E.T. the Extraterrestrial often gets sole blame for the video game crash of 1983. Yes, it's true that this failed movie tie-in nearly burned the gaming industry to the ground, however it was the Atari port of Pac-Man that lit the match. When the original game blew up at arcades, gaming companies were desperate to port Pac-Man to every console imaginable. And here's the problem, despite Pac-Man's rudimentary design, it took 18 months to develop. Because of this, recreating it was no easy task, especially for a single Atari developer who was expected to create a port in 6 months. Worse still, Ted Fry wasn't provided with any design specifications, meaning he had to guess how Pac-Man was programmed by playing it. Despite his best efforts, his Frankensteined Pac-Man was a glitchy travesty with little resemblance to the original. Considering this abomination played a hand at nearly collapsing the Western world of gaming, you would have every reason to believe it tanked. Ironically, Pac-Man is the best-selling game on the Atari 2600. Selling 8 million units, this utter crap fest, and I can't believe I get to say this, was the most successful game ever at the time. Unbelievable. Number 2. KINECT Adventures. The KINECT was supposed to be the Xbox 360's secret weapon. Rather than relying on a peripheral like the Wii Remote or the PlayStation Move, Microsoft's motion camera would read the player's movements, effectively turning them into the controller. If this technology was precise, the KINECT template title KINECT Adventures would become a literal game changer. Unfortunately, the gadget's ability to read movements is so inadequate you safely assume the developers released KINECT Adventures to hit a deadline, not because they believed in the product. If the motion sensors worked flawlessly, this sports title is still not worth getting, since it only contains 5 mini-games. Recognising how atrocious KINECT Adventures was, the developers must have been 100% certain that it would flop. But somehow this hunk of junk sold 24 million units, making it the most successful game on the Xbox 360. Not Minecraft, not Halo, not Grand Theft freaking Auto 5, this glitchy disaster outsold them all. And number 1, Human Fall Flat. Human Fall Flat is a pretty straightforward game which utilises a real-life physics engine. As you traverse around the open-ended arenas, you must solve puzzles, climb platforms, and most importantly, not fall to your death. Curve Digital's title was originally released on the PC back in 2016. Due to its success, it was ported to Steam, PS4, and Xbox One the following year. After a multiplayer was incorporated, Human Fall Flat's popularity soared, allowing it to be ported onto almost every system and mobile device. Even if you are a fan of this cute puzzler, you probably don't comprehend how profitable it's become. Human Fall Flat has sold a whopping 40 million units. It's outsold Breath of the Wild and Skyrim by 10 million. Humans Fall Flat came out less than a decade ago, and its sales are almost on par with Pac-Man and Tetris. Do you know what makes this accomplishment even more unbelievable? Human Fall Flat isn't very good. The Xbox One port received the highest Metacritic rating, which was an underwhelming 73%. This means the best version of this platformer is just okay. And yet, Human Fall Flat has become one of the most successful video games in history. And that's the list. Let us know what you thought of this video down in the comments below. Which of these video game sales numbers surprised you the most? And of course, let us know of any others that we could have included. Make sure you like this video, share it with your friends, subscribe and hit that notification bell. Head over to WhatCulture.com for more content every day. I've been Cy for WhatCulture, and have a good week.